comes to the topic of increasing the federal minimum wage, you have progressive senators like Bernie Sanders doing what he can to get it done through passage with a simple Senate majority. Then you have Republicans like House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who don't want any real economic relief to Americans at all. In fact, he was pretty blunt about that during a recent interview on CNBC. Let's take a look at what he thinks should be done.
I think the three things we need to do: back to work, back to school, back to health. So I would spend more money on COVID. I wouldn't reward states. What they're doing is they're reversing the order of how they provide resources to the states. Those that actually shut down get more money. California just came out with a $10 billion surplus, and they're going to get the biggest chunk of the money. But states with low unemployment that stayed open are actually going to be in a negative ability of receiving resources. So I would focus, and I would give incentives to open up schools. I would give incentives for COVID vaccines and others. I would give incentives that this country starts working again.
So that insufferable opinion, of course, is led with all sorts of misleading, statements, including the misleading statement regarding California getting more aid than other states. What he's referring to is the fact that, states like California did shut down businesses, which meant that more people had to deal with layoffs as a result of this pandemic. And so more money is gonna go to states to help relieve the economic anxiety that people are feeling as a result of their layoffs. Then you have states that stayed open and then suppressed coronavirus data like Florida to make it appear as though everything's been hunky-dory and that businesses should have been open all along. Meanwhile, 500,000 Americans are dead from this virus, and the number certainly did not need to be anywhere near as high if red states actually took the pandemic seriously. But there's Kevin McCarthy. He's not in the Senate, he's in the House, but it gives you a sense of the callous mentality that Republican lawmakers have. Then you go to Mitt Romney, who recently in an op-ed decided to trash some of the priorities that Biden has in his $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief plan. He says, a group of us proposed $618 billion as a compromise that matched President Biden's proposed health and vaccine funding, extended enhanced federal unemployment benefits, provided economic relief for those with the greatest need, and included nutrition funding, small business assistance, and resources to get children safely back to school. And I really want to reiterate something that I've been saying on this show. Everyone wants schools to reopen, but we live in a system where public schools are not all created equally, okay? We have public schools that are severely underfunded and do not have the resources to open safely. And then we have some public schools that are in better parts of the country that have better funding and might have an easier time opening safely. Right? These are nuanced issues that Republicans seem to want to have a one-size-fits-all policy for. But more importantly, at the end of the day, what they want more than anything is to get kids back in school so their parents can get back in work and that their stock portfolios don't further suffer from this coronavirus pandemic. They just want people to get back to work. That's all they really want at the end of the day. And before I get to Mitt Romney's proposal for the federal minimum wage hike, Nando, I want to know what you think. Am I being a little too harsh on Republicans here?
Short answer is no.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Not at all. Adequately harsh.
Okay, I like it. I like it. Well, then in that case, why don't we talk a little bit about what Romney and Senator Cotton are proposing, which I think is just so incredibly insulting. So Senators Tom Cotton and Mitt Romney unveiled their proposed legislation that would gradually raise the minimum wage to $10, not $15 an hour. Not immediately, but by 2025. 2025. So you don't get $15 an hour by 2024 as the Biden proposal stipulates. What they would do is cut that to $10 an hour and it would phase in over the next 5 years. Because inflation apparently isn't a thing. for Republicans. I just find it hilarious when you have tremendously wealthy Republican senators telling us that we don't need a $15 an hour minimum wage hike, and that just too much money. Let's do $10 an hour over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I mean it's the Mitt Romney befuddles me so much because he is one of the most evil people on the planet. Like straight up, he's a purely brazen plutocrat who his history at Bain Capital is just one of destroying the livelihood of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Americans through his like vulture capitalism, which he basically invented. He invented that kind of industry. Okay. So whenever you see private equity destroying some company and firing millions of people, thank you to Mitt Romney for inventing that. And he positions himself because of his like anti-Trumpness every once in a while, even though he desperately begged him to be a Secretary of State. And there's that famous picture of Mitt Romney in getting caught in the restaurant, which always makes me laugh. He'll say something like, Mr. Trump, sir, have you no decency? And then everyone's like, oh my God, this man is a saint. And Mitt Romney is a disgusting ghoul, a cretin, like an absolute just disgusting brazen plutocrat. I don't know how to explain it, like how to put it any clearer. And this is just another example. It's like, $15 minimum wage. We cannot give the poors that much money. This is not right. We need to give them $10 over the next 5 years. We're gonna raise it a measly $2.75 an hour over 5 years. Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, no, it's again, it's so insulting, but they go further. Cotton and Romney go further because they're like, how can we tie this to something else that we really want? And their disdain for immigrants, particularly undocumented immigrants, is clear in their proposal, because what they would also do through the passage of this federal minimum wage hike is ensure that all employers use the federal government's E-Verify program to screen out undocumented workers. So this is their way of trying to kill two birds with one stone. This is unlikely to pass, but the fact that they put this out there in order to pander to working people, at least make it appear as though they're concerned about working people, while simultaneously putting in these disgusting provisions that clearly target undocumented immigrants. I mean, it tells you everything you know, or everything you need to know, I should say, about their priorities. Their bill also authorizes states to share driver's license information with the federal E-Verify program, and approves $100 million in automatic annual funding to protect E-Verify from government shutdowns or funding delays. Because if the government shuts down and all those government workers lose out on valuable, necessary, critical income, that's okay. But we gotta make sure that we have safeguards in place so the E-Verify program continues to operate as needed, even during a government shutdown. That's who these people are.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many, Republicans. There's a group of Republicans who kind of understand that, broadly speaking, their agenda is tremendously unpopular. They skate by playing up culture issues, and they skate by mostly because the Democrats allow them to, because they're terrible. Like if the Democratic Party were like even halfway decent, they should destroy Republicans in every election. But because the Republicans understand that their agenda is so unpopular, there's a group of them that have tried these kind of heterodox positions, Cotton to some extent, Hawley, Rubio, all these guys have been talking to people who have been, convincing them to sort of pose in a different way vis-a-vis American workers. And it's just such an utter fraud. It's so obvious that it's a fraud. And I understand why certain people kind of want to at least take them seriously. I understand that we're stuck between two parties and the Democrats are terrible, and there has to be some sort of rupture at some point. But it's so transparently fraudulent what these people are doing, because whenever they're called out on their bluff, meaning like a broadly based economic populist policy that's actually on the table, they immediately go running and hiding, and it's just,
for sure.
It's just transparent. Just gotta call them on their bluff every time. They'll never follow through.
And by the way, one other they included this. This is the thing that blows my mind, that they thought, no, this isn't cruel. This is totally fine. The Republican proposal maintains the sheltered workshop exemption. You're probably wondering what that is. That exempts employees with disabilities from the minimum wage, guys. The Democratic proposal would set the 14C wage, as it's known, equal to the federal minimum wage by 2026. There shouldn't be a difference in what disabled people get paid and what non-disabled people get paid. How are we even having a conversation about this? What is this? This is insane.
A level of cruelty and callousness that boggles the mind. I mean, it's what these people are. The people who run our country are just cruel, callous, maniacs. I mean, I don't know how to explain it any clearer. This is why QAnon is ridiculous, obviously, but the reason why it's been able to fester and sort of take root in American society is because we're led by these cretinous people. They're evil people, and people kind of understand that. People that would include this kind of provision in a bill like this. There's been studies done in the past when Republican voters or even Democratic voters and independents have been sat down and explained the Republican agenda to them, the actual Republican agenda. It happened a lot with the Paul Ryan budget, the famous Paul Ryan budgets, and voters refused to believe it. They were like, no, there's no way one of the two major political parties that govern us would actually adopt these positions. It's so cruel and inhumane that it's almost transcends the realm of belief for most voters. I mean, Republicans get away with that all the time. They propose policies that are so ridiculously cruel that when voters hear about it, they're like, that's impossible. There's no way a sane person would propose that, and they just flat out reject it. It's crazy.
But honestly, Democrats don't really campaign in a way that calls them out for these things. They don't.
Well, and they don't propose an alternative is the problem. Is they don't propose an alternative. The Republicans will stake out the sort of Attila the Hun position here on the far right, and then that'll set the tone for the rest of the conversation. But Democrats will be like, well, actually, what if we went to just 2 steps to the left of that, and they don't provide a clear distinction, and they don't provide a clear alternative, and they haven't delivered the goods in a long time, which is why voters don't trust them. That's the fundamental problem: is that voters don't believe Republicans and voters don't trust Democrats, and that's where we're stuck in our politics.
Well, Josh Hawley had his own proposal, which essentially is nothing more than tax cuts. Federal subsidies for people who aren't earning the minimum wage of $16.50, which is what he would want to implement. It's nonsense, it's garbage, and it would expire in 2024 when he plans to run for president. So just another, and by the way, he calls it the blue collar bonus. He's also a fraud, by the way. So, whatever you hear from these Republican lawmakers who are trying to pander to working people in this country, understand that at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is prevent the passage of legislation that should have passed already, guys. $15 an hour for federal minimum wage is something that should have passed years ago. And the fact that we're still having a ridiculous debate about it tells you even with all of these constituents for both Democrats and Republicans in favor of increasing the federal minimum wage, it tells you everything you need to know about how dysfunctional and how bought off our politicians really are.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, I really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.